already. That works.
Yep, that sounds good.
And I don't know if you guys can see the numbers, but I can see when people join live. So we've been live for 7 seconds. But it'll tell me if they're joining from Facebook or YouTube. And again, their comments. So I wanted to ask, because I was going to put a banner up at the end, where you would like people to follow you for social media. I do have Instagram, Horror Rewind. And then for Richard, I have Instagram and Twitter.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Anywhere else?
Yeah.
No, because Facebook.
Go ahead, Richard. Go.
No, you go ahead. I'm good.
I was just gonna say we have like a Horror Rewind Twitter and then our own personal Twitters, just our names. I think Kelly Florence is Kelly Florence 19, and I'm Meg.
No, it's just Kelly Florence.
Oh, it is?
Yep.
Why did I think it was 19?
So that's my email address.
Okay. Instagram and Facebook at Horror Rewind. Did you say Facebook for you, Meg?
Oh, yeah. Facebook and Twitter, Meg Hafdahl.
Hello, everyone. We've already got 12 viewers hopping on here. We're going to get started in a minute, so make sure you grab your drink and your popcorn. We're just chit-chatting in the background while we get some people on here. Kelly, did you say Facebook and Twitter?
Yep, and Instagram.
Okay, all three.
Yep.
I admit I feel like I should be on Twitter more than I am, because I know that's the place where people read, but I'm a visual person. I love Instagram. I love pictures of books.
And
Twitter's
some people
been really
put
good
such
to me.
beautiful pictures too of books.
Oh yeah, I definitely took one for this. Just
saw
programmed
that.
it and like gave them credit because I'm like, oh, that's such a pretty picture. What'd you say, Rich?
I said Twitter's been actually really good to me. I found a lot of interesting people on there, and a lot of really loyal readers and collectors. So.
Oh yeah,
and it's easy to use. I mean, I'm a techno idiot, and I kind of had Twitter mastered in a week. So this app is pretty easy too. You were right. I was worried because you know me, and I got right on, which was unusual. So
that's what I said. I feel like it's one of the easiest ones. So here, I'll put a ticker down here in case anybody wants to follow those. Those are all of everybody's handles. Hopefully. Tell me if I did that all right or if I need to correct any of that.
Yeah, I'm sure it's fine.
I think it looks good.
Okay. Ooh. All right. Lots of comments. Yay, yay, yay. Oh, somebody said good morning. Ooh.
Good morning.
I'm glad wherever you're joining us from, because it's 7 o'clock here on the Eastern Shore and 6 o'clock wherever you ladies are joining us from. All right. So I think we're ready to get started. We have everyone here. All right. I'm going to go ahead and uncover us and get started. Hello. Hi. So I'm just going to flip back. Oh, everybody says hello from Rhode Island. Blarney, Rhode Island, it says. Looks like we've got almost everybody is coming in from YouTube right now. So welcome, everybody. I will let you introduce yourselves if that works. And then I have a funny story about Richard really quick. And even Meg, I can say. But go ahead. I'll let you introduce yourself. Let's go with Meg first.
Okay, hi, I'm Meg Hafdahl. I'm the co-author of The Science of Stephen King, as well as The Science of Monsters and The Science of Women in Horror, with my bestie right there, Kelly. And I'm also the co-host of Horror Rewind, our podcast, and I also write fiction. My third novel just came out, and from Inklings Publishing, and all of it is horror. And that's who I am, and I'm just so excited to be here.
Yes, and hi, I'm Kelly Florence, co-author of all the books Meg mentioned, plus our fourth book, The Science of Serial Killers, coming out next October. I'm a teacher. I teach full-time communications at a college, and I'm on sabbatical this semester. So it's kind of worked out because it's been a strange semester.
Rich Chizmar. I'm kind of a dinosaur. I've been doing this for 30 years, and I run Cemetery Dance and write and edit and publish. So now I got to hear this funny story about me. I'm
It's
nervous.
not really
all
a
the
funny.
time.
I feel weird. I'm like, almost fangirly in the way. I told her I'd give her a shout out, but since I'm in Hartford County right now, I'm getting my last meal in this area for a while, and I had Sean Boland's, if you're familiar with it, and I asked my daughter when we left. You were signing books from me earlier, and we left, and she goes, "I want Sean Boland's," which is very weird. My 9-year-old wanting to eat at this restaurant seems very strange to me. But we ordered out, and I got it home, and I realized that's where I met my friend Colleen at a book club, who was like, "You've got to meet this guy, Richard." So then for like a year afterwards, I'm like, how am I going to meet him? And then finally we opened the bookstore, and I sent an email, and I talked to some of your staff, and then finally you even reached out, and we did a signing. It's been a year since we did the signing, I realized the other day. So to me, it was just such a weird coincidence, which is really funny because that's going to bring me back to the topic of the science of Stephen King, talking about coincidences. But it was just such a, like I said, serendipity coincidence, as I want to say, where talking about Colleen, who is a huge Stephen King fan as well. And that was the first book club that I ever joined because it was an easy topic. It was, you could have read any Stephen King book. That was the book club for that particular event. And I'm like, oh, I can do that. There's no pressure there. I can talk about any Stephen King book.
How come she didn't invite me?
I don't know. I don't know. It was 2017. So I'm not sure, but she definitely told me all about you, and it was really great. So I'm very grateful. She's going to rewatch this. I asked her to join us, but she said she wasn't going to be able to. So she's going to rewatch this, and I told her I'd give her a shout out. But speaking of coincidences, now I got to find which chapter it was. I don't remember which one off the top of my head it is.
You said
it's Gwendy's button box.
It is. Okay. Yes, duh. Even more perfect. Chef's kiss on that one.
Yeah. Rabbit hole on that chapter.
Oh, all right. So I don't know. I just want to dive right in and talk about it. I will say if anyone has questions, by the way, I did not introduce myself. I'm Liz. I own Capricorn Books. We are an online, I call us a traveling bookstore, independent bookstore. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments, and I will ask them of the authors. Oh, somebody here is joining us 8 a.m. in the Philippines. So we have Dublin, Ireland, Maine. We've got people from all over. So welcome everybody. Where do you guys want to start? Because I'll just start right to coincidences.
Just ask away. We love talking about ourselves and Stephen King. So no worries.
I got it. Like I said, I was doing markers just because I'm like, what? And I tried to pick. So what I love about this book is, it's funny because I feel like a lot of times people use the word digestible. I don't know that I would even use that word so much as snack size. The chapters are really snack size. They're very, very, very easy to read in about 5-10 minutes. So you don't feel like you have to get bogged down necessarily. Like if you don't have a lot of time, it's a good like bus book. And I was telling Richard too, I'm an audiobook person, especially for long books, because I like to speed through them a little bit. But this is definitely one I would want to read. I love all of the visual aspects that you have here, the little bits and blurbs, as I'll call them. Now I'm trying to find Gwendy so I can pull up the coincidence part. I just thought that was such a great, and your interview, Richard.
Nice.
But do you guys have anything in particular you want to say about writing it, and how you guys met, and how you guys got started, and where you got the idea to do Stephen King in particular, other than your love of Stephen King?
Well, we knew, we wanted to keep working with Skyhorse Publishing, who had done the first two books with, and we were at that point where we had to start sort of spitballing ideas. And I believe it was Kelly who's like, the little light bulb went over her head, and she was like, oh my gosh, Stephen King. Because we knew we wanted to stay, in our horror genre, and we had talked a lot about horror films And we had even touched on a few Stephen King based movies. But it was just the perfect idea because Stephen King has created so many worlds and world, or however you want to put it. But he's created just all these characters and all these concepts. And not only that, but people are so plugged in to Stephen King, and people who love to read and learn more. I mean, these are readers. These are people who care. So I think it was really the perfect idea. And I have to give that to Kelly because she came up with it. And then I was like, yes. And so then what we did is we kind of started separating, she is, for instance, like the Dark Tower person. So she knew like she was going to write about the Dark Tower. And, I knew there were certain novels that were my novels, like The Shining or Needful Things or things like that. And so we kind of started separating like that, but I'll kind of let Kelly take it from there.
So back to your question about how we met and how we came up with all of this crazy idea. We actually met because of an X-Files t-shirt. I was wearing it when I was in a shop that Meg was working in 20 years ago. And she's like, oh my gosh, I'm a big X-Files fan too. We exchanged emails on a piece of paper like you did back then, no social media. And we became fast friends. We found out we both had a big love of horror movies and Stephen King novels and other things in common. And so we started our podcast, Horror Rewind, to go back and watch these movies from our childhood. And then it grew into now these books and looking at horror from a scientific perspective. And we found that the things that scare us are often rooted in truth. And that's scarier. That's the scariest thing of all.
Oh, I can't hear Liz.
Yeah, I lost you.
Liz, we can't hear you.
I muted myself.
There you go.
I tried to do that to cut out background noise when other people are talking, and of course I always forget to turn myself on. But I just love that it's a nonfiction Stephen King. I feel like there's not a ton of this. I will say, I know you bring up the short nonfiction guns when talking about Rage. And I have to say I have that, but I haven't listened. It's an audio, it's a CD, and I haven't listened to it yet.
Wow.
So, and it's interesting because you do, as I said, I tabbed my book earlier to try to talk about some specific books that were maybe not the most common that I've talked to fans about. That was one of my big things when people come into my store. They know, like, out of all of my shelves, my science fiction section was almost all Stephen King. And people were like, why? Like, there are a lot of other authors you can carry. I'm like, yeah, but I can talk about him. Like, and so like Richard has his own shelf too as well. So Richard, what did you think when you were approached, when you heard about their project and to be interviewed?
I love books like these. There used to be a lot more. Like I said, I'm kind of a dinosaur, so I've been around for a long time. And the old Doug Winter books and Underwood Miller, who was a specialty publisher, I think in Pennsylvania. They used to put out collections of Steve's interviews from magazines and newspapers. And like I said, Doug Winter did The Art of Darkness, which was a bunch of different essays. So I love these things. I mean, and there's not as many, like you mentioned, there's not as many around now as there used to be. So it was I was just happy to hear that the book was in the works, and doing the interview it's always fun talking about Steve because he's he's such a great guy that I never get tired of talking about my friendship and my business relationship with him. And then I got my copy of the book and really enjoyed it. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's, they're pretty short chapters. You can read, about 2 or 3 different books and then, put it down and you pick it up, 2 days later and you didn't miss a beat. You're right back into the flow.
We lost Kelly for a second. There she goes.
There she is.
We're going to hop around the screen. Sorry, the way it goes. So someone asked here, I'm just trying to read all these. We do have some Baltimore friends here. I like that you were separate and still writing in the same book. I like that too. And that you chose, and I like that you identify, because like I said, I think it was Kelly who wrote this chapter and then you do interviews together. That's a lot of fun. Someone asked about where to find your podcast. And I do have at the bottom here, the Instagram and Facebook, and Twitter handles for everyone. So if you want to follow any of these authors individually as groups, they're on there. I didn't put Cemetery Dance. Does Cemetery Dance have
Yeah, it's got all that, but yeah, it's okay. Yeah.
Okay. Like, I know there'll be a whole lot more, but
we're easy to find.
And somebody asked if the book comes in hardcover. As far as I know, it's only paperback.
Yeah, it's just paperback, and then the audio version is coming out November 24th. So that's exciting for people who like to listen. I'm really excited to hear it. That'll be kind of fun.
That's funny because that was actually, I'm so glad you brought that up because as I was saying earlier, I love audiobooks. And that one, you know, I would definitely go through this one pretty quickly. That would take a quick car ride for me. But I will say, I'll have to talk to you later about, we can actually save the audio from this and attach it to the audiobook on our program called Libro FM. So we can turn this into a audiobook extra. Maybe later.
Cool. Yeah.
I have to figure out how it works still, but that's some fun things that you can learn, and I'll share that with you. I'll send you guys those emails.
Awesome.
So
I've never listened to an audiobook before.
Hopped on here. Somebody said they have to grab their book. You can get that at Capricoast Books. I will throw that on the bottom here. But what was your favorite chapter to write? I mean, that's not asking your favorite Stephen King book. I'm not going to ask that question. What was your favorite chapter to write?
I know my personal favorite chapter to write was 11/22/63 because when I was in junior high, I became obsessed learning about the JFK assassination. And I was that kid who went to the library and checked out the Warren Commission. And no one could relate. Like Meg said, if we had known each other in high school, she would have been like supporting my research. But instead, I got to read this novel decades later. And then now I got to research on it. So it was like all of my worlds collided.
Yeah, that's a really cool chapter too. And I think for me, I don't know what it was, but I reread The Dark Half. I had read it like a million years ago, and I decided to reread it before I did the chapter on it. And I don't know, there was just something about that novel that really spoke to me. I think just about kind of the biography of what Stephen King was going through at the time and kind of what he was writing about. Like, I don't know, it made sense to me. And then I went down this like rabbit hole of conjoined twins, which was really interesting. And also Needful Things. I went into this whole like concept of the soul, which is not something I've like contemplated very much myself. And that's kind of what's fun about this. You know, you were saying like it's kind of digestible or snack size. Kelly and I are not scientists. Like our background is in literature and film and communication. So we want to make it approachable for everyone. We don't want to have like a super dense like physics lesson or anything. We want to like still relate it back, you know, to what the average person understands about science, but also learning. So for me, that was really cool to just see how these doctors were actually trying to weigh the soul. And I mean, all this crazy stuff that I wouldn't necessarily go and seek out myself. That's what I love about doing a book like this is just the research. And like Kelly said, we're kind of research nerds, so we like it.
It's so funny that you say that because I'm thinking as I was reading it, I'm like, I'm making notes in the margin. I'm like, oh, I need to learn more about this. So you do give, like I said, it's I say snack size, but it's just like whetting the appetite on all these things that really tie in such a different way to look at it. That makes me now want to research all these things. And the story I was going to say about you, Meg, not really a story so much, but how you and I met was just because you had shared your book in another podcast, My Favorite Murder podcast group. And I'm like, oh, hey. And I emailed you right away or messaged you right away. And I'm like, hey, I need to talk to you. Like, let's get this together. So it's just, I'm always about those little, like, where can I find things all over? So I love getting excited about stuff like this and just reading. I think one of the things that I enjoy is that it's not just one science topic. Like you don't pick, for most books, you're not choosing just one thing to research. You always have almost two in every chapter from the ones I was reading. I'm going to try to find an example, and it's not even the ones that you would expect in most of them, not the things that I would think that you would cover. Like Doomakey, you had, let me pull it up. I love having the book right here handy. Now I need to find it because, like I said, I marked all these things and I'm pulling out. I'm trying to read. I'm going to be writing another book with another author soon. Oh, here's a quick question. Well, let me ask Richard, you having read this, what did you think I mean, I assume that you've read at least your chapter.
Right. No, I've read most of the book.
Okay, good. Is there anything that surprised you? I mean, being a friend of Steve and reading and knowing his books like you do, was there anything that surprised you or you hadn't considered or thought of?
You know what? I'm like his perfect. How do I put it? You know, I'm kind of his like perfect McDonald's reader, because I kind of go in. I kind of go in just looking at story. I don't usually dig too deep. Obviously I find something, reading Steve, the way his characters are drawn, you end up, kind of living in their skin while you're reading the book. So you're in the story, whether whether you try to be or not. But it opened my eyes to a lot of things, just a different way of looking at some of his stories. Like I said, I'm kind of, I tease him because I'm just like, I'm an easy target. And he always, he's like, well, I wish everyone was as easy as you. I'm the same way with movies. It's like, I flip on a movie for 2 hours, entertain me a little bit, and I'm fine. I'm not going to get online and start criticizing the director and the screenwriter and all that. But so, yeah, I mean, looking through the book, books like this, I think they kind of, they make you think and they open your eyes to a different way of looking at the stories. And it did make, you said you weren't going to ask them their favorite Stephen King books, but I will. I'm
Okay.
curious what they are.
Mine is Needful Things, because I love his, what is the word for those books? I lost it, but those books where he has all those characters and then he brings them together, and it's like somehow, even though he has so many characters in Needful Things, but yet you love or hate them all. Like even though he's not giving you a whole novel full of them, he's only giving you, the little sections. Somehow Stephen has that way of like just making you so freaking invested in what they're doing. And so Needful Things to me is like this just great coalescing of all these stories coming together, and that's what I love most about what he does.
Yeah, well, like if I think of Needful Things right now, I think his name's Brian Rusk. Is that the kid with the baseball card?
Yes.
And then there's Polly and her arthritis, and then who's Polly's coworker who ends up. But yeah, I know what you're saying. I mean, he just, though, to me, again, I'm a broken record, but it's Steve's characters. And when he world builds like that, that's Castle Rock. And he every little nook and cranny of the town, and you know what people had for dinner. And again, I'm a fanboy, so I can say it, but the way he writes, it makes you interested in what they had for dinner and who's sleeping with who and who's. Needful Things is a nasty book. I mean, I like that book a lot. But it's one of those books where, like, some of his books I could reread, no problems. I've read Needful Things a few times, but it's one of those ones where I'm like not anxious to go back, because I think about the big bloody, and I'm not spoiling anything for anyone, but I think about the big bloody fight on the street corner and just some of, and the kid with the baseball card. It's so dark it's like, that's one of even the movie, when I flip by it and it's on, anytime it's a Stephen King movie, I want to stop. But if it's Needful Things, and Dark Half's the same way, by the way. So you
I guess I'm just dark.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so you must have a pretty dark mind, but but Dark Half's the same way. That's a nasty book. So how about, what's yours?
And I, as Meg mentioned, I really love the Dark Tower series, but if I had to just pick a single book, I would pick 11/22/63.
Yeah.
For the reasons I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, no, that's for all those people who always tell me, yeah, that's nice, but I'm not a Stephen King fan. I always tell them, try 11/22/63 and tell me if you don't cry at the end, and tell me if you don't have a problem putting the book down. And that's a great book. And he goes back to Derry, and we get to meet some of those kids again. So it's such a good book, and it's a romance too. So
it's funny that you say that. I'm gonna steal it here. Because I don't know. I could never pick just one favorite, because each one I read, and I will admit, there's some that I haven't gotten around to reading yet. I will say I'm not very good at rereading anything. There's several that I want to go back and reread, but there's too many that I haven't read yet to go back and reread anything. But like I said, I tried to go through this and make some notes in in books that I read that I loved, that I wanted to learn more about, that maybe are not the most common. So I feel like people don't really talk about Doohickey a lot, and Lisi's story, which I consider Lisi's story definitely very romance. And
Oh yeah.
I actually, for my wedding anniversary, your first anniversary is paper. I had someone, I don't know if you've ever seen the paper sculptures where people fold in like a design. I had our wedding date folded into Lisi's story. So that's like what I gave my husband for our first paper anniversary. He hasn't read the book, but it's more significant to me. But I was like, no, you have to understand, like, this is the most romantic Stephen King, Bag of Bones, things like that are romantic, that I don't know. It's interesting to say that about a Stephen King book, but thinking about those, it's interesting that Meg says she likes the darker ones, because it's making me realize I think I like the very hopeful ones, like Dr. Sleep and like Doohickey, where they have these like happy endings in a way, for as much as a Stephen King book can have a happy ending. Now, here's my actual question: is what's your first Stephen King? I know one of you covered it. I don't remember who in the beginning of the book. You were talking about Carrie, I think.
Yeah. In the introduction, Meg talks about how her first book was Carrie, that she read. My first was, my aunt got me a copy of Drawing of the Three, which then I had to go back and read The Gunslinger after, but I was able to catch up. But yeah, so that was my first entrance. But I had seen Stephen King movies before that.
Yeah, my mom finally, like, my parents, when I was growing up, they had all the Stephen King books. And so I was interested and intrigued because I had heard, this is the master of horror, like, and I was just drawn to anything horror. And so finally, when I was 13, I think 12 or 13, my mom let me read Carrie. And for me, that was perfect. I think Carrie is like the perfect book to read for a 13-year-old horror lover like myself. I mean, because how could I not fall in love with Carrie's story? And then from then on, it was like, I just read everything. Like Kelly, we just voraciously then started reading everything he wrote, which, I mean, how can you not? And rereading, like you were saying, I'm kind of going back and rereading. And I know, like, as I've gotten older, like I read it when I was 17, and now I've read it since I've grown up and had kids, and it's like a whole other different experience. So it's kind of fun. And there are ones like, I read Gerald's Game when I was a teenager, and I still haven't read it again as an adult. And like, I really want to go back and experience it as like a grown up now.
Rose Matters that way. That makes me think of another one that I think people don't talk a lot about, is Rose Matter. And that's another one. I was like, I have such a picture of it in my head from what I remember. I want to go back and read it and see what things that I missed, or things that I would definitely look at from a different perspective. And maybe you bring up a good point, and maybe that's why I don't reread anything, is because I don't want it to change. No, it was good the first time. I was nannying for, I was probably 15 or 16, and I was nannying for my aunt, cousin, Christine. And in her childhood bedroom, there was a copy of Christine, and that was my first. And then I read it, and I still have my original copy that is like, the cover fell off. So I like used clear packing tape to like fix it. And when I met my husband, he likes to collect hardcovers. So he was like, we should get rid of all these paperbacks. I'm like, you are not getting rid of that. Like, I probably will never read it. It's just going to stay there. I don't want to reread it and destroy the cover even further. But I know you guys all know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
So someone asked, is the book always better than the movie?
Yes. I mean, obviously, right? I mean,
absolutely.
When we're talking Stephen King. Anybody disagree?
Not me. I agree.
I can't think of one that is at all. There was one that I was arguing. Oh, I will say, I know Dark Tower is one of those movies that people have a hard time with, but I will say I'm one of those people who went on the internet and I loved the fan theories of that I will say Dark Tower, that whole series is one of my favorites. So to know the beginning and the ending, and to know the movie, it's a different world. I will definitely say that. I love Rose Madder. I bought it randomly at a used book sale. And on that comment, I will talk about Carrie for a second. Did you see, I think Meg might have seen my Instagram post this week where I got Carrie for 20 cents at a used book sale, and it was signed. Yeah, you'll have to go check my Instagram. It was a library book sale, and it was for 20 cents, and I picked it up, and I went to read it later, and I flipped open to the first page, and it was signed and dated. And it was made out to this guy named Tim, and Tim had put his embossed, like his library mark in there, and he had a very unique name. So I was able to Google him. This sounds crazy, but I was able to Google him because I'm like, I need to know if he wants it back. Like maybe he's looking for this. Maybe he didn't need to donate it. And I actually, long story very short, I caught up with him, and he was like, oh, no, you can have it. You can enjoy it. Like, I'm happy it found a friend. I got it signed when I was in college, and I have a bunch of King books I donated. And I was like, oh, wow. God, I can't believe this. So that was my story. And I was very gentle. I actually did read that copy. Very gently, but I read it. Yeah. So it could be loved, very well loved. So Dr. Sleep was a great book. I'm just reading. You can't put on screen what this man can put in your mind. That's a great quote for that. But what I was saying earlier, since I found my spot, is talking about your chapters here and how you cover more than one topic. Talking about Jim McKee, you were talking about his, of course, now I lost my page again, amputation. Again, I don't remember that in the book. I need to reread that book because I remember loving it, but I don't remember that aspect of it. But you talk about amputation, and then you switch over to art therapy. And so many of your chapters are like that. And I really appreciate that because, again, you're giving us just a little, almost a teaser of all these aspects that you've covered and people that you interview. And you do interview, you have almost every chapter has someone you interview, correct?
Yeah, a lot of them do. And that's the thing that was fun about research too. It's like for Carrie, for example, the obvious route would be to talk about telekinesis, but instead let's look at other aspects and, you know, turn our brains a different way and look at it. And then going down that research hole, looking at, okay, who could we interview about this, or who could we talk to learn more and take another perspective. And so I think that's the fun that we decided on early on in our very first book is let's not go obvious. Let's really stretch our minds.
Yeah, and the interviews really enhance, and that's why I reached out to Richard because, you know, our level of knowledge only goes so far, and we're fans, and we absolutely love everything about Stephen King. But like, I was interested to talk to Richard. Like, one thing I wanted to talk about with him was like collaboration, because Kelly and I collaborate. You know, we write these nonfiction books. We are screenplay writers together, things like that. But the thought of writing a novel with somebody else, like, I think my control freak kind of comes out a little bit. And I'm like, okay, I don't know if I could do it. So that was one of the questions I had for him and he was very like calm about it. He's like, yeah, it went great. Like, to me, I'm like, oh, okay. So
no, I was terrified. I was, okay, I mean, I've been very upfront about that with Button Box. When I mean, the collaborative process was fine because Steve's such a great guy. But no, when that came about, you know, the timeline was, and I remember it very clearly, was, you know, it was kind of a go on a Friday that, you know, hey, yeah, we're going to do this. And I spent that weekend just mortified, thinking to myself, what have I done? Is absolutely what I thought. And then that Monday, I sat down with a yellow pad and a pencil, and I started jotting down some notes, and my hand was shaking, and I threw the pen down. I was like, this is ridiculous. Come on. And so I just opened my laptop and started writing, and like the next 3 hours just blew by, and I kind of blinked out of it. And I was in Castle Rock, and I was in the story, and I knew Gwendy by then, and the nerves were gone then, but the 48 hours before that were just sheer terror. And then even then, when I think I knocked out like 10,000 words in the next 3 days, and I thought, if I start going back and editing this, I'm never going to send it to him. So I just attached it and sent it. And I said, Steve, I have no idea. So just take a look. Let me know what you think. I mean, we have a very honest relationship. so I know he wouldn't hesitate to say, Rich, you did not do good. But fortunately that wasn't he liked it, and we went from there. But yeah, no, it even this last one, the third book, I looked back and I'm like, how, because I said it after the first one, which was, just a novella, after the fact. I'm like, I have no idea how that happened. I have no idea how I wrote about Castle Rock and I wrote about, the old sheriff and all this stuff. And then the second book, to have the freedom, and he was too busy to write with me at the time. I thought the same thing when I was finished with that. I have no idea how that happened or how I did that. So yeah, when it was time to start working on this third book, it was the same way. You think you're this, grizzled collaborative veteran. But when it's Steve King, all the rules are out the window. And I sat down for this one and I'm like, I can't do this. I've forgotten how to write. I can't even read. And by day 2, you're back into it and you're doing crazy things like saying, Steve, that's a great idea, but what about this? And it's definitely interesting. I step back and I think how many people have done this with them, and it's very few people.
Yeah.
And obviously I'm grateful that I'm one of them, and still astonished and amazed by that. But yeah, I know what you're saying. I whether I wanted or not, I have this kind of inside view of his work process, and it's just, it's amazing to sit back and watch the choices that he makes and how he does it. He's quick, he's good, I just told him he's like a mad scientist.
That's so cool.
And I'm going along for the ride. So
and one of the main things was, so I just read Gwendy's Magic Feather, which was awesome, by the way. And yeah, the idea that you got to play around in Castle Rock all on your own, like, to me, that was just like, oh my gosh, a dream. But also the pressure, I would imagine, like.
Well, and I'll make it a short story, but the funny thing was, and I've said this before, with the second one, the way it went down is I woke up one morning and I had the idea that Gwendy was a new member of Congress, and that the box would return, and that just that environment would set up some interesting possibilities. And I texted, I emailed him like a 2-3 sentence email when I woke up, and he wrote back and he said, "This is a brilliant idea. You got to do it." And I wrote him back and I said, well, he said, I'm busy with, and I don't remember which book it was, but he said, but you've got to run with it. You've got to do it. And I wrote him back and I said, okay. Cause I took that as, you write the first draft, Rich, and I'll come back and make you look good. So what I did is I sat down and I wrote it over the space of a couple months, and I sent it to him, and he read it and he's like, no, this is all you. He goes, if you want me to, I'll do an edit on it, but this is all you. And that's the thing, is I look back and I realized that if I had known it was all me from day one, I probably wouldn't have done what I did. Because I kind of sucked some of his old characters back into the story with Norris Ridgwick and things like that from Needful Things. And I revitalized Castle Rock after the end of Needful Things. I never would have had the, what's to do that. So, and I was really honest with him. I'm like, Steve, I'm not trying to back in a corner here, obviously. I said, but I thought you were going to come on, piggyback on and write it with me. And he's like, no, this is all you. And I was like, oh my God. So yeah. People say you had guts to do that. And I'm like, I really didn't. I just didn't know. I didn't know I was doing it.
Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
Sometimes that is the thing that needs to happen to make hard things happen in our life. We believe it's one thing, and then in the end, it turns out to not be that. But then the hard thing is done. So my friend Harry here in the comments asked, what's the hardest part? So I'll read the whole comment. I'm going to be writing a book with another author soon. What is the hardest part about doing it? Anyone? Either anyone who wants to take it.
Well, like I just profess that I'm a control freak. But I think that I wouldn't be able to co-write a book with somebody I didn't trust, but I trust Kelly, like, with my life. So obviously I could write a book with her. It's about, like, if it was just somebody I met off the street, I would probably, a lot of like the controlling part of me would probably come out, and Kelly's like, oh yeah, she was controlling this whole time too. But, I think I did it pretty well, and we handled it really well. And I think knowing that we both want to share our voice and do different chapters, I think we both have different voices, and we wanted to be able to shine in our own ways. Like I said, she's the Dark Tower queen, so like she needs to do that, and I am particular about certain things. So I think knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are, and just doing it with somebody you trust.
And that, piggybacking off of that, I would say being on the same page, pun intended or no pun intended, that you know what you want to do and you are going to support each other through it, and not being afraid to speak up if you think it's going in a wildly wrong direction.
Did you guys surprise each other ever? Did either one of you ever turn in a chapter and the other one be like, holy, I didn't expect that. Yeah, that's the cool thing about collaboration, is just the fact that you're working hand in hand with someone who you really trust and admire and respect, and at the same time the discovery process that comes about through collaborating with them.
Well, and it makes we make each other better then, I think, too, or you make each other better because then you can just kind of bounce ideas off each other and then go different places that you might not have gone on your own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you guys did a great job.
Oh, thank you.
Definitely. I mean, you definitely hear the different voices, but they don't argue. That makes sense. They don't contradict each other. I'm trying to find some other questions in here because there was a lot of them that came up all of a sudden. What are some of the bigger horror tropes that authors have to work around when relating to an original paranormal / otherworldly story to the world of science and fact?
That's all them.
That's kind of a good question.
Talking about tropes, in our second book, it's called Science of Women in Horror, and we actually go through every section of the book is tropes that women have in horror. So it's like the little girl, the Gorgon, or the final girl, the sort of going more the sexual route, or things like that. So through horror film, we learned a lot about horror tropes, and we discussed that through a scientific lens of through feminist theory and psychology and things like that. As far as science, I guess for the Stephen King books, I mean, Stephen King, you could say there's a horror trope of a werewolf or a certain monster, whatever. Stephen King always turns everything on his head, so it's not hard to sort of find different routes out. It's not like he's writing a classic ghost story and we don't know where to sort of find the science in that. There's always something in a Stephen King book that brings it to the other level. So, we're able to sort of circumvent that. I mean, if that's what they're asking, I don't know, but Stephen King gives us so many routes.
And that's what I was going to say too, it's not obvious. I'm thinking about parallel universes or time travel in a couple of the chapters, and just because you can time travel doesn't mean that it's, you come back and then you re-enter and everything's reset, or the parallel universe isn't exactly what you would think it is. And so it's not a typical sort of sci-fi trope. It's always a little bit different.
And someone asked, what was your biggest surprise when piecing the science together with this book?
I think for me is how fundamentally based in truth Stephen King's work is. I mean, when we think about it, it's very, it seems like crazy and intense. And of course there's supernatural. But just like his characters, how rooted they are in reality, his plot lines are rooted in reality too. I mean, yes, then they grow and they sprout into supernatural things. But like Kelly said, it's really the true things that are scary. And that's what Stephen King harnesses and sort of makes better, and then brings in the creature beneath Derry and brings in all those things. But it starts with the fact that pretty much all of us are kind of creeped out by clowns, so and that's a documented thing, and that's something we go into. So I would say that. I don't know, Kelly, what do you think?
And I would say researching just those real true things, like a headline that he read or a news story watched, that sparked that idea. And so it was based in truth, and then bringing in that supernatural element. That was surprising to learn that, oh, wait, this really happened. And that's where this character came from, or this plot.
Yeah. And I'll pull up two examples that I flagged as like completely shocking. You said headlines, but also talking about, trying to find, you specifically dated. There was, oh my gosh, now where's the date? There was something that you dated that, oh yeah. So talking about the 1918 flu pandemic, and you say that in 2008 it was discovered why the disease was so deadly. I'm like, we didn't know why it was so deadly until 2008. Oh my God. That freaks me out to think
bodes
about.
well for us.
I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah, exactly. And then the other one was the sheep. You wrote that so well. Now where is it? So I can read that part.
The beginning of the Stand chapter.
Yes. You said it as if I heard him in my head say it so casually. Oh, it was about the sheep. And I'm thinking like, oh, it's 4 to 5 sheep. And then you talk about the article and it's like a ridiculous number of sheep. Was it 6,000?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. I'm trying to find it. 32. Here we go. Turn it to page. And then, so one of the other questions I'll say is, my father used to read stories from Nightmares and Dreamscapes to me at bedtime as a child. Side note, I did that to my infant before she could read. I would read it to her in her infancy, so she didn't know what I was saying. It was just words. This spawned my love for horror. Do you recommend introducing kids to King at a young age? Obviously, that depends.
So like I have 2 sons, and one of them is just naturally inclined to horror, and the other is not. And that was pretty obvious. It's been pretty obvious. And I think, Kelly, both of your kids are.
They both like horror, yeah.
Yeah. I have one child that's just like, no, I'm good. And he's my older one. He's 13. And then my 9-year-old like can't get enough of it. And so, which of course I love. So yes, I think that if kids love horror, it means that or whatever genre, it means that they love to expand their mind. I mean, that's what I love about horror, is that it's expanding what you believe and think and giving you some new ideas. So I say yes.
Yeah, I just think it depends on the title. I think, yeah. I mean, really young, Eyes of the Dragon and certain books like that. I think Gwendy's a great book for a young teenage girl to read. I mean, boy or girl. But yeah. If I had a daughter who was a young teenager, I'd be really happy with her reading Gwendy, because I think there's some good messages in there and it's entertaining. Christine is such a great book for that, teenage angst and what, you read Christine and Steve lived so much of that book. I've written essays about Christine, and I'm just like, I knew these people, I knew the people in this book. I grew up with them. And I think that's a universal thing. And I think that's a cool thing. I mean, that's why I connected with them as a teenager, and that's why it meant so much to me, is because I got it, I was there. So, yeah, I just don't give them like, Gerald's Game when they're 12, and I think you're fine.
It's one of my, I will say, one that I think of a lot is Talisman, because it's a young boy going across the country. And I think that that's a great, but that's fantasy versus horror. You have all these mesh of things. But I have read part of Wendy with my daughter who was there. That's what she was excited to come to Cemetery Dance today. So that's why she was in there with me, carrying boxes on the door. Yeah.
I think I met her at one of the signings.
Yeah. Oh yeah. She knew exactly. Yeah. She knew who you are, because she knows Wendy and she knows all that. So, I have a 9-year-old as well who she can be hotter. I mean, it's every day is a little different how she feels about it. She was huge. She loves Coraline. Like, she loved those scary things when she was younger. But then she started to, I think it's that age where you realize some of that is not make believe. And so that's when she started getting a little scared of things. But other times she can be very interested in it. So we have read parts of Gwendy, but we haven't gotten all the way through it yet with her. Button box, I should say. So I do have the sheet number. I have to find it again. 6,000 sheep. Yeah, 6,000 sheep were killed. Not just a few sheep by this chemical spill in the stand. Not in the stand. This really happened. But that's what inspired the stand. And actually, someone asked, would you rewrite the section on the stand after the recent COVID? And if Kelly, if you don't mind, what I would say is you don't have to, because you wrote this during COVID.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'm going to read a quote from it later.
Yeah. And so that was the weird thing. It was like, oh, because I think our deadline was April or May. And so we were in the thick of it when I was finishing up that chapter, and I'm like, no, I mean, these are still the same things I'm going to talk about. And we still don't know enough to rewrite it. I mean, maybe we won't for 100 years, hopefully not. But, it's crazy to look at the similarities, but of course differences. We talk a lot about pandemics history, and humanity's been through this before many times.
And it was just so perfect when I was reading it, because I'm like, oh, this is right now. I can still read it. And so I thought it was an interesting question I had to share. I'm like, oh no, wait until you read it, dear reader. My Photos is their name on here. Let me see if there's any other questions I missed. Seeing Richard at a book signing in Bangor last year inspired me to write my first novella this year.
Yeah, Josh is a good guy. I remember him from Billy and I met him at and I'm going to forget the name of the store, of course, because it's late on a Friday night. But yeah, no, I remember Josh, and we follow each other on Twitter. So I just congratulate him. I think he just had his first sale. His first short story sale.
Yes, I know Josh from Twitter.
Yeah,
hi.
I recognize a lot of the names over here in the comments, which is cool. And I really like this comment that says, "I read it when I was 10, and I turned out totally normal."
Oh,
no, I feel like I was young when I read it too, and I'm like, oof. But I think as we approach an hour, I will say I think that's all the general stuff I want to say without giving away too much, because everybody needs to read this for themselves. It is very readable, very easy, and it's. I mean, you just whet the appetite for people to want to learn more. So my next question, I know you said, go ahead and talk about what your next book is. What you said, and then my follow-up question is, I mean, you didn't cover all of them, so you can easily write a volume 2. What do you think about that? I'm sure you've been asked that already.
That's a great idea. Actually, I had somebody message me, and they're like, why didn't you write about every single Stephen King book? And I'm like, I'm sorry. But yeah, that would be great. It would be great to do a volume 2. Obviously, he just has so much that we could talk about. But I'll let Kelly talk more about our next book. And then I want to hear about Chasing the Boogeyman. That's what I'm here for. Okay. Go ahead, Kelly.
Yeah. So our next book, like, as I said, October 2021, we're talking about the science of serial killers. And our approach is not to lift serial killers up on a pedestal, but to talk about the science behind their stories, how they were portrayed on film or in other media. And so it's coming at it again from a different angle. And it's being very respectful of the victims and the topics, and looking at the filmmaking and the science within those topics.
Yeah, I want to order that.
I know. And so as Meg knows, as I said earlier, we're fans of My Favorite Murder, the podcast, and my 9-year-old has been listening to that. My question for you is Horror Rewind. Is that a podcast that I can probably share with my 9-year-old?
No, yes. Sometimes.
I swear sometimes.
My Favorite Murder podcast is also known as the F Word Murder Mystery Show. They swear a lot, and I will tell you, our new house is on a golf course, and my child has learned more swears in the past week from golfers than anyone else.
She's going to learn a lot. That's why I always say I cuss on the golf course and playing poker.
Yeah.
Don't worry
So
about him saying
that's okay. No, she knows what words are not okay to repeat. But I think it sounds like a podcast she would appreciate, and definitely a book she'd appreciate. We just learned about Mary Vincent.
Ooh.
And yes, she loved that one. She loved learning about that. And I was like, this is a survivor. A woman survived this attack. So she appreciates that.
I got to talk to this retired FBI agent who worked the Dahmer case and worked the Green River Killer case. And that was one of the coolest things ever. Like I don't want to say fangirling, but I was fangirling a little bit. He was so cool. And I had so many questions for him. So that was very cool. So that will be in the book as well.
We also carry a book by, sorry, we're totally getting off topic right now. Just a quick insert. The lead, I don't remember his exact title, for the DC snipers, wrote his story of catching them and his like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. This is what I had to do. And all that. Definitely did not glorify at all. And it was definitely much more from the police perspective and how the police handled things. They were very secondary in the book. And then until the end, and then you find, you know, everything that happened. And that was definitely interesting. And we interviewed him maybe 2 years ago for so one of the book tours, book clubs is a true crime. That's a very loose term in a sense because we do read a lot of fiction. We just read In Cold Blood, because that's something that a lot of us knew about but had never actually read. So we finally read that. But the serial killer one I want to try to get back more into nonfiction. So the serial killer one might be on our list for next year. So when that comes out, we'll read it and we'll have another event. I'll have you come talk to the book club ladies. So
awesome. But now I want to hear what Richard
I would say now we're talking about Boogeyman. Richard, it's your spotlight.
No, I'm a huge true crime fan. I mean, I read the books. I still think people sometimes ask me what's the scariest book you've ever read, and I usually say it, but sometimes I'll say it's The Stranger Beside Me.
Oh, yeah.
Because, parts of that book, there's imagery in that book that I've just never forgotten and can't. And that book did give me nightmares. The fact that he killed those sorority girls with pieces of wood, firewood from outside of their apartment house. And the fact that there was, bark and pieces of the branches and, mixed in with their, what was left of them. So yeah, I've just always been, and I would love to watch these true crime podcasts. Firstly, I've never started because, like I said, I'm not very good with technology. But secondly, I'm afraid that if I did start, I would never stop. I'd be obsessed, and I wouldn't get anything else done. But anything that comes on Netflix or the HBO, there's a new one coming on November 15th, a Murder on a Beach or something, and I've read all about it in advance, and I'm ready. I'm there.
You're right.
So yeah, I read a lot of the books. So yeah, Boogeyman just came about. I had just finished a novella, and I just kept thinking about, when I graduated from college, I was engaged and I was getting married in like 9 months or something. So instead of going and getting an apartment or whatever, I just, and my fiance was still in college. She was going to graduate that spring. I just moved home. And I lived at home with my parents for that 9 months. And it was just it was an unusual experience. I had started Cemetery Dance. I was working on the magazine. I was writing my own stories and just beginning to sell them. And there I was living back in the bedroom where I grew up in. And it was just a very strange dynamic. And I moved back to my small town of Edgewood, and, all my friends were gone, but my parents were still, having dinner every night, and my dad was still going to work. And there was a prowler. There was a night prowler who the newspapers called the Phantom Fondler, and he would break into these houses in our neighborhood in Edgewood, and he would touch the women's hair or their feet. And when they woke up, he would take off. And he had done this to like 15 or 20 victims and not been caught. And that was happening while I was in college and during the period I was home. And I just, when I started thinking about this, I thought, because of my fascination with serial killers and the human monsters as opposed to the supernatural, it just really stuck in my head. So I started writing this mainly just for myself. And I remember it was not, it was after Gwindy 2, and my agent and I had a very, pretty much clear plan on what book I was going to write next. And this was not it. I didn't even mention it. And I remember I wrote the entire book pretty quickly. It took me, maybe 2.5 months to get the first draft down. But I remember thinking, maybe no one will ever see this, because I'm dumb enough to write a book with myself as the main character. And, 60% of it's true, except for this killer. But so yeah, anyway.
Cool.
So yeah, the short version is that I wrote it for myself. I felt very self-indulgent at times because I was just writing this very autobiographical story. I don't know what's happening.
We can see hear you fine, but
yeah, there's something beeping.
Oh, okay. It's not here.
So, yeah, it's telling me to shut up, I think.
I'm just looking here if there's any other questions. The last question that just popped up, my photos is asking some good questions. Any King book you always wanted to read but haven't yet? I will say I haven't read Insomnia. That one seems a little daunting. It's another one of those like giant books.
Yeah, I haven't finished The Dark Tower yet, and so Kelly is not pleased with me. I tend to go. Maybe it's been obvious now, but I tend to go for more like really horror, like straight, horror. So, Wizard and Glass was like very fantasy, and so I enjoyed it, but I think it kind of slowed me down a little bit. So I need to like get back in there and finish the journey to the tower.
And I haven't read If It Bleeds yet. It came out, in May, and it's just been a whirlwind of life. So I need to read that.
I understand. There's more modern ones I haven't had a chance to yet either. But
those are all really good, by the way.
Of course.
Okay, good. We'll get on it.
I admit I have not read The Institute yet, which is I'm a big I love Dr. Sleep. Here's a question. Is there any book you don't like, or what's your least favorite Stephen King book? That's allowed to be asked. I will say I did not care for Black House. I had such a hard time with that. But it being a sequel,
Which one?
Black House.
Okay.
I love The Talisman. But as a sequel, I was really let down. But then you look at like The Shining versus Dr. Sleep. I didn't know what to expect. And that, I will say, that was one movie that I was concerned about because I love the book so much. And I was very impressed by the movie. It was everything that I remembered in the book. And my husband, I read it maybe a year and a half before I saw the movie, and my husband read it right before. So he was asking me these questions about things, and I'm like, obviously that didn't matter because I don't remember any of that. Everything that I remember is on the screen, so it was just beautiful. But anybody want to say one they don't like?
Never.
No. There's so many. I'm sure.
Hanging.
What's that?
I didn't like Gerald's Game the first time I read it. I just felt like it was really dense and slow moving, and I didn't hate it. I remember because it was right around the time I published Chattery Teeth and Cemetery Dance from Steve, and he actually sent me a copy of. It was my first personally inscribed book from Steve. He sent me a copy, and the entire title page was filled with his handwriting, a very nice inscription. And I read the book, and I'm like, oh. I remember being, sad because I'm like, this is going to be my favorite Stephen King book ever. But upon further readings, obviously, reading it at an older age and with a different set of eyes, I enjoy it quite a bit. And the fact that it pairs up with Dolores Claiborne, I love that, the way he did that. So. And
I will say on that note, I have two other things in my head. I'm going to try to remember. I have a friend who is just, he'll devour a book in a night. Like he'll devour it in 2 days, which to me is, yes, he is that kind of a reader. He has read through Stephen King books so many times. He reads them in different orders to see those maps, as we'll call it. So one time he read the whole list as it relates to Dark Tower. and like so that he could see every like web and connection. And he's like, well, now I'm going to read it through in this order to see these ties. And I'm like, oh my God. As somebody who just doesn't reread, I just can't believe it. But I support his habit wholly. He always asks me for books, and I'm always glad to hand them over. So Dark Tower is definitely different from the gore and horror. It is much more adventure and fantasy, I would put it. If you can go through, it's worth reading, definitely. I will say I did it on audio. I think it's a beautiful audiobook just because it is a tale. And the man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger was chasing the boogeyman. I like that comment. Just finished my first trip to the tower, and yes, you should continue.
All right, I'll get on it. We're getting locked down a little bit more here, so I have no excuses.
I resisted the Dark Tower for decades because I just thought, the whole fantasy element, the same thing with the Talisman, and I'll be a name dropper, but it was Steve's assistant Marcia up in his office in Bangor who kept telling me that I needed to read the Dark Tower and also the Talisman. And Frank Darabont, the director too, he kept telling me, Rich, you've got to read it. It's the best thing he's done. And while I don't think it's the best thing he's done, it's fantastic. And my son Billy right now is listening to it on audio.
Cool.
And he's having a blast. This past summer is when he started, and he would come in, he listened to a lot of it when he was working out or when he was outside, and he would just come in all smiles. Dad, I can't believe this just happened. And I'm just like, just wait. It even gets better. So yeah, I resisted it because I thought I'm not a fantasy fan, but, again, it was the characters and his world building that kind of carried it away for me. And before I know it, I'm like all in on the talking trains and this, that, and everything else. So yeah, he'll win you over. Just give him the time.
Yes, that's the magic of Stephen King.
Yeah.
You do mention and this is something that I think this is just I want to bring it up because I feel like not enough people talk about it. You do touch a little bit about it in the book. You do comment about Kingdom Hospital, talking about something that was not. Oh, I need more Kingdom Hospital in my life. I can't wait to show that to my daughter. That is something that I will gladly share with her. Richard, I assume you've seen it.
I have, but you know what? I don't have a really clear memory. I remember there was an anteater.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And I remember it was just weird. I mean, I remember enjoying it, but I remember it was weird as hell.
I have it on DVD. I religiously went to this back when DVD stores were like a thing, like Blockbuster's going out of business, and like collected all. I think there's 7 in the set or something like that. I had to find all of them because I had to have the whole series. So I have it on DVD because it's just they need to put it on TV or something. I definitely can't wait to share it. So if anybody has never heard of that, because again, I think it's such a Stephen King project that people don't talk about. Yes, Kingdom Hospital. And anything before I read our final closing quote from Kelly, or Kelly, do you want to read it? I don't want to throw you under the bus, but
yeah. Can you tell me the page number?
Yes, it is page 37.
Okay.
This is kind of throwing back to our the question earlier about the stand and COVID, and this was just Kelly's sentence here struck me so much last night that I was like, I knew this was how I want to wrap up this evening. I will say before we leave, thank you all so much for joining us, everybody who's joining us in the comments and all that, and to all our wonderful authors. I really, really, really appreciate it. Your time tonight. I love you all. And I can't wait to see you for your next one and all of your writing, all of your next books.
Thank you.
Find Signs of Stephen King and Chasing the Boogeyman and a few of other Richard signed books on our website, www.capricornbooks.com. And you can follow everybody. You can see their things have been scrolling the whole night. So if you want to follow them more, there you go. Kelly, take it away.
Okay. So only time will tell what this current health crisis will hold for the future of our world. But in the meantime, stay well, dear reader. Don't forget to wash your hands and curl up with a good book.
Yeah, thank you. Have a wonderful night, everybody. And stay safe. And as Kelly said, wash your hands.
See you, everybody.